Welcome to Naked and Afraid. I'm Bobby Lawrence, and this is Ronald May. Again, kind of the title of the show.
Yes.
We're really, before God, we're stripped naked of our self-righteousness. Yes. We're bare, naked before Him. And are we afraid? Or are we just like, well, me and Him have a great understanding. I made my peace with the man upstairs, or the old man upstairs. There's no awe of God. When evening came, after the sun had set, they brought to him all those who were sick and demon-possessed. The whole town was assembled at the door, and he healed many who were sick with various diseases and drove out many demons, and he would not permit the demons to speak because they knew him.
Wow.
Woo.
There's a lot of teaching and preaching with what you just said there. But this what Jesus was doing got around the city. Got around the city that he cast out that demon. It said then after everybody heard that, how did they know that person was demon possessed? How did they figure out that this person needed deliverance? That's a question to ask, because how'd they know?
How did they know that they were demon
Possessed.
Well, when actually we hadn't seen it as prevalent in America, but when I went to Israel, they were people manifesting in the streets. When I was in Tiberias, I walked down to the river one night and I was like, this is commonplace here. Mm-hmm. And in America, it's a little bit more subdued than that.
But can I stop you there for a second?
Yeah.
Because in America, we have condoned a lot to say that.
Yes, mental illness, but we see it on the street.
Well, so how many people are addicted to drugs? How many people are addicted to alcohol? How many people are what we call mentally ill, and our mental institutions are overwhelmed? And see, America, we call that illness. We call drunkenness illness. We call drug addiction illness.
Yeah.
Back in Jesus' day, they called that possession.
Yeah, that's exactly what they call it. And yes. We got a nice name for everything in America.
Yes. So I think we see just as much here. My eyes opened up when we went to New Orleans, and I heard about all the demon possession and people doing crazy things, and I even heard about sacrifices, animal sacrifices and stuff, and that was all in the back of my head. I grew up in a small country town where those were our horror stories. We'd go in the cemetery and we'd tell those stories. I got to New Orleans, and you walk down the street during Mardi Gras and you see it.
Oh yeah. Well, if we got time, I could tell you. One time, Megan woke me up, my wife woke me up early in the morning. She said, this lady's coming over and you need to get up. So I get up and go into the living room, and this woman walks in. I ain't been up maybe 2 minutes. And she comes in our living room, and her and Megan sit on our love seat across from me. I'm sitting on the couch, and this woman started talking about, and she looked really bad. I mean, just dark look. I mean, she was nicely dressed, but she just was dark looking like death. And she started talking about loving trees and loving her pets. And I don't know why this come out of me, but I said they'll love creation more than the Creator. And when I said that, she screamed. And she flew up in the air. We had a vaulted ceiling. And she flew across the room and landed between my legs. And she was on her knees and her hands. She looked like she was on all fours. And this woman looked like a werewolf. And she started speaking in other tongues. I mean, she was speaking in a whole other language. But this woman contorted and looked like a werewolf. And you can say what you want to. I just started laughing. It just got funny to me. Now, my wife's sitting over there. She's standing on the love seat. Her eyes are bigger saucers. And I get tickled. I can't help it. I just started laughing. And that made that thing mad.
Mm-hmm.
And she flew up in the air again, landed on her back, and she sprawled out. Her legs and her hands were like this. And it looked like her dress was ironed into the floor. And I asked her, I said, what's your name? And it did not want to tell me who she was. And that was amazing right there. Well, then the front door opened, and it was her 21-year-old daughter. Walked in, saw her mom. She fell down on the floor and started slithering like a snake. And slithering in where her mom was, she was doing her tongue like a snake and started spitting up blood. So, you could not even, what ended up happening. This woman was a witch, probably one of the highest up in the state of Georgia. And her friend died. She went to the cemetery and summons her friend's spirit up and was bringing it to my house to give it to my wife.
Mm.
And I mean, she, so come to find out, this woman was brought in a satanic home. Her daddy would pregnate her, and then they would sacrifice the babies.
Mm.
So they didn't go to a hospital, they'd have them at home, so nobody knew about them. That's how evil this was.
Wow.
And the lady said, why didn't you videotape this? I said, if we would have videotaped it, they still wouldn't believe. Now, my wife can testify, and if that woman was here, she'd say,
Yes.
I was dead. And boy, if you've seen her now, she's really beautiful. Her daughter, I mean, the life came back into them, and they're living for the Lord. Some people would say, oh, that's far-fetched. Well, you believe the part of this you want to believe. And all I know is it happened there, and Jesus said, greater works will you do.
Yes.
Now, I know a lot of you believe that's just for the disciples. Well, Jesus wasn't exactly a disciple. Paul. And, when he got
Yes.
struck down, but he was doing the same thing Jesus was doing. And then Paul tells us to imitate him. So, you can have as much God as you want, but I want every bit I can get. And if you're not experiencing stuff like demons and stuff, you ain't in the game. Get in the game. Megan tell you, we've gone to Walmart and people just start hissing at me. I didn't do nothing to provoke them whatsoever. And I'm nowhere near where Jesus was. But I would imagine that was going on with him. Everywhere he went, they just started popping
Yes.
out and manifesting. And started saying all kinds of things. And how many times did Jesus get confronted? Jesus preaches this huge revival, gets in the boat, goes across the sea, and who's the first thing he runs into? The demoniac.
Mm-hmm.
Man, to tell you. Anyway,
Yes.
I'll shut up.
Yes. No, anybody who doesn't believe in the dark side, in spiritual wickedness, and the devil, just take a cruise down to Mardi Gras in New Orleans, or like on a Fat Tuesday or whatever they call it, and they do that stuff right there. Now, the more sophisticated people will go to abortion clinics to sacrifice their kids to the enemy, to the devil.
Well, that's what they did in the Old Testament,
Yes.
and they paid for it. And
Yes.
I think in America, I forget who it was I heard say this, in January 22nd of 1970 is when they passed the first law in New York State to legalize abortion, which led to Roe versus Wade. But when they signed that bill, January 22nd, 50 years to the day, Jubilee, on that same date of 2020, COVID hit America, and it hit in a church.